It is the top of the hour, but people are still joining fairly frequently. We'll give a few minutes for the join rate to slow down. Again, as you join, you're encouraged to share video. We'd like for this to be as close to an in-person meeting as we can achieve. Do remember that the session is being recorded and the recording will appear at YouTube later.
Good evening.
Hello.
Hello.
Wow, Wes, do you think you could look any more annoyed? Thank you. Better.
It's been I'm in pain. I did a lot of manual labor over the weekend. Let's just say, moved a lot of.
That was stupid.
Yes, it
Okay.
was.
So our join rate's still fairly high. We'll give it a couple of more minutes before we get started. Repeat, sorry for those that have been on for a while and have heard this several times already. You're encouraged to share video, but do remember that the session is being recorded and will appear at YouTube later. The join rate is starting to slow. I've put links in the chat to both this session. So if you're here, you know that one already, but also to the notes page. If you've not had a chance to skim through the notes on the notes page, please take a moment to do so. I'd invite anyone that has other topics that aren't currently on the agenda that they wish to have bashed in to bring them now. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Under the hot topics for discussion, we'll start with the infrastructure transition progress and the planning for what remains. If you look at the linked diagram, you'll note that almost all of our infrastructure has been moved. We were on DigitalOcean primarily, a little bit of Azure during 120. The few services that had not been migrated, that had interstitially been deployed at Amazon, were moved right after the meeting. We're now to the point where the only things that aren't moved from the older infrastructure system are the email processing chain and mailman, which we'll be talking about a little bit later in the call. The instrumentation that we have been able to add after we've separated the applications into individual services and have the ability to see their impact on their databases has given us a lot of insight into what we should focus on. There are some highlights called out in the notes about the data tracker in particular, where it's spending most of its time. We had sized fairly conservatively so that we would have a smooth meeting, and we are confident that we can reduce the amount of resources that we have put under these applications for 121 and still run at the same or better level of performance, depending on the improvements that we make between now and then to the performance of the application.
Robert, if you don't mind, the extra thing, will it save a lot of money or not? I mean, removing the extra resource.
I'm not parsing a word you're saying.
Okay. So we are reducing the maximum amount of resource we put in AWS, right? For
not in AWS, mostly in DigitalOcean, right?
Okay. Well,
and the point is that we have database clusters that we've given quite a bit of CPU. They don't need so much CPU. We have application Kubernetes deployments where the nodes are of a certain size and they can be a smaller size. And yes, it will reduce our costs.
For sure, but is it cutting in 2 or just 5% or less? Or if you have an idea, right? So
yeah, or of a factor of between 75 to 50% of current burn. And okay. Current burn is tiny compared to before we started moving. So
okay, thank you.
Okay. What remains to move is the email system, and I will let Mark from Sirius talk through the report on where we are on getting the email processing system and mailman moved off of IETFA.
Thank you, Robert. So included in the report is a more in-depth summary of where we are. That's as short as we could get it. The first version was a lot longer. The summary is we are in good shape. We're in good shape to be in the position to close down IETFA within the next week to 2 weeks, certainly by the end of the month. Again, the details are in the report, which was current up to the end of yesterday. As of today, we can tick off the next step, which is the routing through the MX machine and the mailman machine. We had it primarily or mainly done by the end of yesterday. We've cleaned up the edge issues today. So apart from testing, the main substantive areas which we are working on finishing off at the moment is the remaining porting of the new post-confirm and post-fix scripts, finishing off the DKIM signing configuration, and then it's on to testing. But it's looking in good shape to us. That's the summary. Happy to field any questions. I'm going to take that as the no questions. Back to you, Robert, unless there's anything you want me to elaborate on.
And it's like Jade had just started his video. I was wondering if he had something he was going to ask. But okay, good. The one thing I'd add is that we are sensitive to calling back to the last meetings, some of the things that SES does not currently do, including using IPv6, it has some constraints on how messages can be DKIM signed. We have testing in front of us in the next few days to determine that it's going to function. John Levine has been investigating what we would fall back to should we need to have a different egress point than SES. And we've got some good candidates that we are looking at. So,
Just one word, thank you.
sure. All right. Our plan for these meetings was to take most of the rest of the report as read. If anybody has any questions about what's in that report, feel free to bring them up. Or if anybody has a point that they want to particularly focus on that is written into the notes already, bring it up now. Joe, I think you're on the call in particular. Did you want to talk with the group any about trying to get a submodule for the Yang models?
I can. Yeah, so you see it there. The Yang catalog was reported by one of its users a while back, a month or so ago, that the Git, the extracted modules, like from drafts, weren't being put into the Git repository, Yang models / Yang, that the guy at Cisco Einar has been maintaining. That have a lot of vendor modules in there. The RFC, the ratified IETF modules go there, OpenConfig, IEEE, so on and so forth. I looked like, yeah, you're right. It's broken since we moved away from Pantheon. It took me a while to figure out why. And the why is because we didn't get all of the information from Pantheon as to what they were doing. And what they were doing was essentially they'd created their own personal access tokens for GitHub, and they had some external automation, some CI pipeline, that anytime new modules were extracted, it would create a pull request to Einar, to the main Yang models repository, and it's set up to auto approve from their account. So I'm like, wow, okay, that's horribly broken. But the code is really, really messy. And by messy, I just mean it's complicated. It uses the Python GitHub or Git library, but it's just, they've got this repository, they create a fork in it, they bring these modules over, they commit them, they push them, they push back to the main, they create a pull request. So anyway, long and short, what's happening now is I created a new clean fork of the Yang modules repository under the tools team. I created my own personal access token, since that's how the code is currently written. And now that's working again, in that it's putting the extracted modules into this fork. But because I don't have this other CI thing, I'm creating pull requests manually when I get notifications that new modules have been extracted. So that's the short-term approach. Longer term, I'm thinking we do need we should have our own repo where we're maybe off the tools team, where we're pushing all these extracted modules to. That makes sense, right? And then we don't need the pull requests. We just put them up there. And then we have Einar create a submodule in his repo that just points to ours. And then Bob's your uncle, great, it all works. Problem with that is, it sounds simple, but it's going to require quite a bit of code refactoring in the back end of Yang catalog to make it all work, and ripping out a lot of the complexity and simplifying. And right now it's working, so I just haven't had the courage to do that. So it is where it is right now, and it needs to be better.
So Joe, first of all, thank you for your time you spent there on this topic. And you were Jan catalog founder with Benoit, right? So you are getting back your child. More seriously, about the modules extracted from draft and RFC, was there a backlog, or are we missing any of them?
No, actually, when I fixed it, I got them all the backlog got taken care of. So the positive side of this is the user that reported the problem was very pleased when I said it was fixed. He was able to get what he needed done. So all of those pending modules, the extracted modules, are put up, and I'm keeping somewhat, because it's event driven to some extent. It pokes me to do the automation. We're keeping up to date now, but it's obviously not sustainable.
Excellent, thank you.
So a quick question. If this sounds like it's been broken for a while.
Since December.
So that's like 8 months. Does this mean that people aren't really using this very much, or?
So this is a sub or a side piece to Yang catalog, and one that I didn't, one that I knew about but forgot to check because it's not actually part of the catalog. And that is this Git repository, which has nothing to do with the catalog, but I guess during the evolution of it, it was said, hey, this would be really useful if there was a place to download all of these modules as just flat files. And so I guess, hey, we've already got this repository in GitHub. Why don't we make use of that? So apparently that is being used. I guess the person who reported the problem took him a while to figure out where he needed to report the problem to, like what was actually driving the extraction of all of that. And then he finally got to me through Benoit, and I said, oh, crap, yeah, it is actually broken. Sorry. And that's what prompted me to do the fixing at 120.
Okie dokie. Just wondering.
Now, is Yang, we've already gone through the discussion of whether or not Yang, how heavily used Yang catalog really is. We could have that discussion again at some point, but this part I think is actually kind of useful. Whether or not we store it in Git or somewhere else is all another thing we could debate. But I like that approach, because right now, if you as a user wanted to get a bunch of Yang modules out, you'd have to manually use these tools to extract them from various drafts, whereas this already has them all there in one location, which is really nice for doing import testing and various other augmentation testing and so on and so forth.
And there is 1,200 forks of it. So
yeah, there's quite a bit of forks. Yeah, that repository is heavily used and somewhat well known in the industry.
Okay, good.
All right. So if there are any other questions about that, another place that we might want to spend a few minutes talking about is the plan to build infrastructure to allow granting rights on pre-5378 contributions to the trust.
So yeah, I'm going to jump in here and talk about that. So just a reminder for people here, the RSCs before 5378 are not covered by the TLP, the trust legal provisions in their outbound rights, the rights that are given to others from those RSCs, unless one of the authors has granted rights to the IETF trust to allow them to do that. And this is a problem for BIS documents based on pre-5378 documents, because then there's a complex process to go through to be able to create those. So some time ago, the IETF trust, when it was part of the IAOC, had a process to reach out to some authors and get some grants of rights for them, but that fell by the wayside for reasons that predate me. And so in discussions with the IETF trust, we now have agreed on a new mechanism that can automate this process. And the GitHub issue linked to from the notes there gives you an explanation of that. So this is basically a mechanism that somebody can log into Data Tracker. They can say, I would like to grant rights to the IETF Trust for my pre-5378 documents. A PDF is generated which states clearly what they're doing so that they understand this, and they then DocuSign that, and those rights are granted. This a couple of things here. We are not entirely sure when somebody does this what documents they are granting it to. We can give them the we think this is the list, but the grant will be a and anything else I'm not aware of type thing on that grant there. So that means that somebody can grant something, and over time the documents that it applies to can be updated as that is better understood. The other thing is that there is a note in there that says on that issue, says the Data Tracker will also record the existence of this grant and will now indicate that the listed documents are covered by the TLP, so that when you go to see a document, you can then find out that while this is pre-5378, it is covered by the TLP. No discussion has, I think, yet taken place on how that is going to work or not. But this is the reason I raise this is because this is something that is a particularly awkward workflow for a number of people, creating a BIS document off a pre-5378 document. And so if anybody has any thoughts about their workflow and how they would like their workflow to work, that would be very helpful to understand how then the results of this grant process are then built into Data Tracker and other things from that.
So how do you get around the issue of signing authority as well as, you know, I mean, I've worked for, I think, 5 different companies over the time that I've, you know, contributed to the IETF, some of which don't exist anymore.
If you give, I think if you give away signing authority that you don't have, sucks to be you, not sucks to be the IETF.
Yes, it is down to the individual on that regard, and this is a known problem. We can't give legal advice, but we can help people, I think, work out what their rights are in this regard. In most cases, I think, unless people have it, it would depend which jurisdiction they're in, but if you take the US, for example, unless they specifically have the authority to be able to do this, they won't be able to do this.
Right.
Their employer will own those rights. But,
I mean, isn't that the same thing that currently happens? If you submit a document, you're sort of basically attesting to the fact that you can do stuff for USC when you submit the document, whether or not USC has any view in that.
Yeah, well, fortunately, USC is my easier employee, but I mean, Warren, you're of course 100% right, but at this point, you know, I would assume that my employer has given me acceptance to do that. My issue is more of, for documents written, you know, 15, 20 years ago, that's possibly a lot harder to find somebody that even know, you know, the company did something at the time.
Yeah, but I mean,
we're playing arbitrary.
If you had submitted it 15 years ago, presumably at that time, you thought that you were allowed to do it. And like, I think it always comes down to whenever somebody submits a document, we're trusting them to have done the right. Sorry, I don't know why I'm just like jumping in here with legal advice, because I don't know nothing.
It does sound though, Wes, as if we could supplement this with a organizational thing at some point. That an organization, somebody who works for an organization and is, you know, has the proper authority, can say to us, for all things authored by people who are employees of this organization, we grant these additional rights. And that may be something we need to consider in future.
Yeah, I mean, so to give a concrete example, RFC 4509 is mine. It is the DNSSEC key chaining thing that from the root down is, you know, the cryptographic mechanism that signs all of the DNS right now. I wrote it while I was at Sparta. Sparta no longer exists.
Yep.
Now, granted, there's not going to be a BIS document for it, so it's, you know, not a good example for that, but it just highlights the problem. But I don't mean to dwell on this. I was wondering if that had been thought about. So I think you've given
no, I mean, there are actual genuine applications about this, though. if somebody wants to take the diagram in section 2.2 of that RFC and produce an SVG version of it, not an ASCII diagram version of it, it would very much help if this were covered by the TLP in order for them to be able to do that. Otherwise, they need your permission to do that. So there are benefits even then, but it is complicated, yes. So I will take that back to the trust in conversations then, that maybe we need an organisational mechanism for these type of things, because you know the organisational rights to Sparta will have gone on to another organisation almost certainly, I imagine.
Yeah, in this case, they were bought out, but it was a partial sale. It's not an easy one.
No.
I'd be happy to give a 5-minute lecture to the trust at some point if they want to hear it.
Yeah. Okay. That's all I wanted to say on that. Thank you.
Does anyone have any other questions about the content of the report so far?
No, but I do have a suggestion, which is to remind people how ID NITS 3 will be different from ID NITS 2.
Let's see if Nick is on the call. Yep. Nick, do you want to speak to that? If we don't get audio from Nick shortly, I will. All right. Well, so the essence is that ID NITS 3 is a complete rewrite of ID NITS. ID NITS 2 is a shell script that is built to operate only on the text form of the document. It operates mostly heuristically. ID NITS 3 is written to be a pluggable JavaScript module that is XML aware first. It will do its work over XML to the RFC XML if that's available. And because of the higher semantic content of the RFC XML input, there are many things that it can do directly algorithmically that ID NITS 2 had to resort to heuristics to achieve. It will have the ability also to process text-only documents so that that is maintained. It will be built into the editor that is currently built to help with the RPC workflow, but will also be a pluggable module that the data tracker can use, that author tools can use, and anybody that wants to plug it into their own workflows would also be able to use it. All right. So I have a couple of AOBs that one thing I'd like to point to that's in the notes, and then an AOB. I would like to call out that one of the things that we will be addressing soon is the requiring that drafts be fully standalone when they're submitted to the data tracker. Right now, we accept XML to the draft repository that still has X includes in it. There's nothing really captured other than the derived formats that are generated at the time that let us know what those X includes actually resolved into, and any future use of that XML might reach out to a foreign place and get a completely different resource from that X include than it did at the time of submission. So we had discussed with the ISG quite some time ago that this is problematic. Hopefully the problems are easy to see, but if they're not, let me know. And that we would do the work to make it easy for someone holding an RFC XML document to get a fully expanded version of it that would go into the repository and still maintain their X-include pronouns. Telegraph this back into people that have the RSC XML as derived product from some other source format, such as Markdown going through Cramdown RSC or MMark. So that even people picking up the submitted document could get back to the include version, the pronoun version, easily later if they were wanting to work on, for instance, Abyss. So the any other business I'd like to point to is a message that I sent to the tools discussed lists earlier today about one of our rsync endpoints related to bib XML. We had exposed the data sets that were at tools.ietf.org when tools.ietf.org was authority for those. There's a shortcoming in the new bib service that does not allow us to fully enumerate the data sets. We can't go to it and say, hand me all of the bib XML for all of the drafts, hand me all of the bib XML for all of the IEEE documents that you know about. And for some, we can't. We can go to it and say, hand us all of the bib XML for all of the DOIs. That's just not a reasonable thing to ask it to do. So we have some adjustments that we need to make to that rsync service until we have a better answer for enumerating what the bib XML service does know about. And then eventually when we fix this defect in the bib XML service, we'll revisit and bring the rsync service a little closer into line with what it was a couple of years ago. So for that XML to rsc.bibxml endpoint. So if this interests you, if you've got comments about this, please add them to the thread on the tools discussed list. Any other business that I will throw in. We are planning to hold the 121 code sprint on Sunday, as opposed to the Saturday that it's been at for the last many years. This will let us see if being a little bit closer to the main part of the main meeting week will give us a different subset of attendees at the code sprint than what we've been getting on Saturdays.
I understand the reasoning, but as you can imagine, I'm a little bit sad.
Yeah. And one of our original reasons for putting it on Saturday was so that the people on the IEB and the IESG would have an easier time getting to the event. But the take up from the IEB and the IESG in person has been relatively small. Eric's been consistent, but
Guilty.
Yep. And we'd like to see what the effect is for the rest of the community. So
it's worth a try, and I think you need to do it one or twice at least to see an effect.
Awesome. Does anyone have anything else that they'd like to discuss today? Go ahead, Paul, just jump in.
You're muted.
Yeah, I was looking for the unmute button, sorry. Yes, a question and a comment. The ISG really dislikes the errata verification portal and has been looking at what to do. And since it's been a long time coming that we have been promised that this portal is under design or will be redesigned by the RFC editor, we've been wondering what we can do meantime. So there are some thoughts about maybe using GitHub and using some sort of shuffling system where we use GitHub to actually produce the work and then sort of script it out to launch it against the current RFC editor side. But we want to know, I don't know how far ahead RFC editor and tool teams are talking about whatever is happening in this space, and whether it's too late and we should wait, or whether it's still an unknown time period in the future and maybe we should just write a little shim that could work.
It would be far more than a little shim for the current system, trust me on that. But there have been discussions about what a replacement to the errata system might look like. They are not designed yet. There's a lot of resonance with using the kinds of tools that GitHub brings you, particularly with GitHub discussions. I would expect that our tooling attention towards that is still going to come behind the work that's just now restarted on modernizing the RPC workflow and the redesign of the public-facing part of the RFC editor's website. So it's closer, but it's not immediate in the planning.
Jean is working on the requirements, so maybe Jean, do you want to tell us where you're getting with that?
So we are discussing what a complete overhaul might look like at a higher level, and we share your frustration with the current system, but it's and very high level. We are discussing having like an issue tracker system and an errata system that once it's been worked through in discussions in an issue tracker, then a small set of people could create errata reports for things that need to be captured and let readers know that there's an issue here. As I said, we're still kicking around ideas like, should there be an issue tracker per RFC? Should it just be one large issue tracker and labels determine, oh, this belongs to RFC blah, or this set of RFCs? So we're still in design discussions, and happy to hear, Paul,
Okay.
what you would like to see. And for the timelines, one of the things that the RPC has been talking about is that, well, if it will take some set of months, are there things perhaps we could or should do to make the errata system better in the meantime, or would it be worth the effort? So talking about that.
Okay, that's fair. So so I'll take that back to the ISG. I think maybe one or two ADs will probably just do some experimenting for themselves anyway, just to see how it would map on GitHub, and then it can report back to both the ISG and the tool teams to see what worked or didn't work in, like, you know, in the experiment.
Just to add something, Paul, to help understand the scope of this, feedback has indicated that every step of the process here needs to be reconsidered. So the first step of the process is when people detect an error and report it. We clearly have people who are not aware that there's already been an error found and reporting the same thing. And so how do people understand whether they've already, this has been reported and, you know, rejected or accepted or something, and deal with that? So that's something that needs to be rethought through it. Secondly, there has been feedback from some members of the community that certain things need to be processed in different ways. They need more community review associated with them, in a more structured process before they get to the AD for signing off. Then there are issues around effectively orphaned RFCs as to who gets the errata report and what that person, who the person is to deal with it, and understanding that. And then there's the process then about, is more structure needed around the outcomes of the process? So the things that are held for document update, is more structure needed around that so that they're then fed into a future process or something, or not? And those that are accepted and verified, do they then need to go into a better representation of an RFC plus errata so that people can see the change of it? And do we need to be better at telling people there is an errata in this RFC that is a really serious one? You should look at that. You need to know about that, as opposed to telling people there are 25 erratas in this that are all about a comma being in the wrong place. You really don't need to worry about those. So that's the depth of things that Jean is thinking through and talking to people about.
The AD user experience is also less than wonderful. Like when one gets an errata, you click on it and it makes you log in, but it doesn't actually take you to the errata itself. You then have to go and find the number and copy and paste it and search, and then go find that. And then the login experience is also kind of weird. You log in as a person, and then you have to tell it who you are. Like you have to list your name and who you are again. And so I think it's just the tooling was written, a while back. So as well as the structural thing, it's just user interface feels like it's, 2005 user interface, not 2024 user interface.
So that to me are issues, but actually much less important than the issues of when an errata needs to be slightly modified. People keep thinking like, oh, how do I do this? Does the original reporter needs to do this? Does somebody else needs to do that? Can the AD modify the report and then push it through? So there's a bunch of other things that are also there. And we were hoping at least if we have some sort of a GitHub flow to it, that we could sort of do all the textual changes until the community agrees this is the change that's needed, and then the AD could sign off on it.
Another thing that will be potentially nice in whatever solution we end up with is having less spam errata, because I'm sure Jean is tired of spam errata.
Yes, we all are.
And by that you mean the actual spam and the editorial ones? Because I find like a comma is missing here just as useless as spam.
Nah, I think that those are actually still errata. They're kind of annoying errata, but it's still something that is technically wrong. But I was actually meaning the proper spam ones. Like, I have found something wrong with RFC 0001, and the change is my name is Fred, and you're like, great, buddy. Like, there's hundreds of those.
Yeah, well, at least that has some content. The completely blank ones that show up are great as well. And there's a common thread, not just the errata system, but to the data tracker, to mail archive, to access the mailing list, and that we need to keep in mind, and that's where do we set the barrier to entry? Right? How much resistance do we actually push back so that we put in place so that we don't get things that are an obvious waste of time, or if somebody gives us an obvious waste of time, we make it so that they can't easily waste our time a second time, versus putting a barrier in place that's so high that we lose a contribution that we otherwise would have received.
And can I just add that when we talk about GitHub for something like this, I think we should be focusing on the features that are provided by that, the tracking of things, the modification of things, that sort of stuff, rather than necessarily that product as the way forward. We want to do this from the proper way that set out the requirements that people have, and then look at the best way to implement those, because it may be that this could be implemented much more directly in Data Tracker, for example. I'm not assuming it would be, it's just that we need to do that process.
So, Paul, I think when you came to the mic, you said you had two things. Did you cover them both?
No, it was one thing, but I just had information and questions.
Okay. All right, unless someone has something else to discuss, and it's great that we've had several things brought into any other business. This is exactly the kind of content that this call is hoping to attract. So, but if nobody has anything else, we'll let you get back to your days, and thank everyone again for the time that you're putting in to
Just
help us
one,
make sure that we're doing the right things. Yeah,
we
go
have
ahead.
got a couple of discussion at the end. I don't see them in the notes. Will the notes be updated with the discussion?
Yeah, I don't like typing while everyone can look at me, so I've been taking my notes on a separate thing, and I'll put them in the notes at the end.
Perfect, Liz. Thank you.
All right. Not hearing anything else. Thank you very much, and we will see you at the next call.